Kanye West paints a sad picture about the state of the medical industry when he raps about the premature death of his grandmother in his 2005 song, Roses. He says, "If Magic Johnson got the cure for AIDS and all the broke people passed away, you telling me if my grandma's in the NBA right now she'd be okay?" The price of pharmaceuticals should simply be regulated. Every single person will have to interact with the industry at some point in their life. We don't have any choice in the matter, and the prices they single-handedly get to set have the power to leave us destitute. So I've spent the last several weeks devising a clear, defensible line of reasoning by sourcing information and data to pull out the cold, hard facts. This stands to be applicable to every single person and in the best interest of every single private citizen. So for the last several decades, the price of drugs have increased at a rate that far outpaces the rate of inflation. The culprit lies with the industry, which uses the monetary capital it possesses to lobby Congress to stave off regulation. The only thing that stops this catastrophe from happening is simply voting out the Congress people. We live in America, so we have the power to do that. And these Congress people who participate in lobbying with the industry, if we vote them out, and we vote in like politicians who campaign on pro-regulatory platforms, will be in a much better spot. So the problem is that Big Pharma this is a graph about this is the increase of drugs. So the problem is that Big Pharma, or the pharmaceutical industry, seems to raise drug prices almost like willy-nilly and as it wants. Now, I have a few examples of what this looks like. These examples are in no way the only instances of Big Pharma basically like increasing drugs all they want, but reading out a list would be both time-consuming and really boring for everyone. So yep. Albuterol, which I personally happen to use to treat my asthma, rose from $11 in 2012 to $434 in 2014. Now, the company Milan increased drug prices, the price of Provestin, by 573% from 2013 to 2014. The rising price of EpiPens has rightfully been a topic of outcry in the diabetic community, as it raised a whopping 488% in the last decade. You can't see this, I'm just going to email it to you. So this report, which has been giving us details, is called the Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and it essentially is a watchdog organization that released a report about the price of drugs increasing. Now, that same report cited the manufacturing expenses of these drugs as remaining relatively steady over, that same period of time. So it's not like a supply and demand issue. It's a we want more money issue. So this leaves us at the point of demanding more money for the same inhaler, which is basically like, it can be likened to asking for the same amount for a different amount of money for the same cup of water, but neither inhalers or cups of water are considered precious resources in this part of the world. So we're basically left with exploitation of the market, which is a very bad thing. But what caused this? Who let it get so out of hand? Well, the cause is the pharmaceutical industry itself. The pharmaceutical industry remains unchecked because of lobbying. In fact, 22 of the top 25 pharmaceutical companies lobbied during the last 3 quarters of fiscal year 2018 alone. Not only is lobbying supposed to be illegal, but it's also highly immoral. Basically, it's just another form of corruption, because it's politicians getting paid to act out against the interest of the very people who voted them into the office in the first place. Overall, 153 pharmaceutical companies engaged in some form of political lobbying in 2017. They did so to stave off drug regulations, and all the data was to stave off drug regulations, so nothing actually about what they need. That number, 153, has more than quadrupled in the last 5 years. Now, there are some things over which the generally effective values of the free market system hold very little jurisdiction. Perhaps the most glaring real-world example is pharmaceuticals. There's no competition for the handful of companies that have already established themselves because drugs are so expensive to test and research and develop that the business or the nature of the business simply doesn't lend itself to newcomers. The pharmaceutical industry holds in its hand complete power over basically anyone who needs medicine, which is basically everybody. To some more than others, obviously, but it sets prices arbitrarily, and the alternative option to buying their product is to die in many cases. So we have the cause, or we have the problem and the cause now. This brings us to the solution, and it's basically what we're going to do about it, because it's a very easy issue to fix if people would just decide to vote, acting like they knew what was going on. The government does have the power to regulate any industry it deems necessary, and should it elect to do so, it does have that power. The government doesn't set those regulations because obviously the politicians running that government have been paid off with enough money to buy the island nation of Guam several times over. Other life-preserving industries like water and heating are regulated. In Professor Don Mayer's book, The Legal Environment and Government Regulation of Business, he notes these very industries. The United States Constitution also actually does support the regulation of business, even pharmaceuticals. In Article 1, Section 8, the Commerce Clause gives Congress that power. It says, literally, the United States Congress shall have power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states. Plainly, the government has the power to regulate commercial trade between persons in one state and persons outside of that state. The status quo is ridiculous. More people need to voice their disdain for the exploitation of the market, because simply politicians aren't going to change unless it becomes clear that it threatens their re-election. So to top this off, drug prices are really, really high for no good reason except that the free market has run amok because the people running the free market or the people regulating the free market have been paid off. For that reason, I urge every conscientious citizen to vote for people or politicians who run on a platform that actively disavows lobbying, especially in regards to lobbying in the pharmaceutical industry. Thank you.